Georgia Smith, daughter of Reginald and Ida Smith, was born on May 17, 1900. She was an African-American girl living in Alabama. Her parents had another son named Jack in 1980 who died before Georgia was born. Reginald and Ida met as slaves on a rich white family's plantation. Once the residing white family decided to move up north, they allowed their slaves to use their old property, home, and fertile land to start a new life for themselves. They also paid for Reginald's tuition and referred Ida to another family that lived nearby. Reginald attended Booker T. Washington School for African Americans, Tuskegee Institute, when it first opened in 1881. This school was intended to teach black people the skills and attitudes to pursue to allow them to succeed in a predominantly white American society. There, he studied agriculture to guide him in raising a prosperous beet farm with the land they inherited. While Reginald studied at the university, Ida remained a slave and was a dressmaker in her free time. She also took care of Jack. Reginald and Ida, during the 1890s, were oppressed by anti-voting laws and segregation. The Jim Crow laws were beginning to mold, and her parents were forced to use separate transportation facilities from whites. During this period of fear and violence, Reginald, Ida, and their son Jack were greatly discriminated against. Jack was lynched at 12 years old in 1892 because he was accused of disrespecting a white man. Georgia's birth was not intended. Her mother went into labor while she was working. The beet farm was destroyed in 1898 by the boll weevil epidemic, sending her family into poverty. Georgia's life was not going to be an easy one. Through these following diary entries, Georgia will tell her stories of the early 1900s and how she survived poverty, discrimination, and violence. July 22, 1919. Dear Diary, since the boll weevil epidemic of 1898 destroyed my father's beet farm, my family has been living in dirt-poor, impoverished conditions for almost 20 years. In 1914, I moved up to the north to Chicago, where my father found a job at the foundry. Here, he made metal castings and dealt with hot metal and iron ore. Conditions there were dirty and dangerous. Unfortunately, my father died last week in a horrific accident. He fell from an extreme height while cleaning the factory. Before he died, he bought me a piano where I learned to imitate the style of Scott Joplin and began to write my own music. I attended many jazz dances and sang songs about living in the South with my neighbors. We resided in the tenements of Chicago's Black Belt, one of Chicago's black neighborhoods. Here, we grew a strong connection with the people around us who also used to live in the South. My father could afford to purchase bus fare for my mother and I to go to the suburbs around Chicago for work. I worked for the Anderson family as a housemaid and did all of their cleaning, laundry, and cared for their children. My mother worked at a laundry and dressmaking shop near the Andersons' house at a strip mall for a small wage that contributed to buying food for my family. The influenza also raged at this time, and though none of my family were affected by it, my friend, Minnie, was a victim of it. Today, something awful happened. Riots started happening in the town because the people are upset about the drowning of a black boy up at Lake Michigan. The town is in chaos. April 6, 1925. I'm 25 years old. My mother passed 2 years ago in her mid-40s. She caught the last whiff of the influenza disease. I have recently just been working as a housemaid for the Andersons for the past 6 years. I am responsible for all of the cooking and housemaiding for the Andersons and the cleaning. Their children have become like my children, and I have been raising them. Mass media has been influencing every part of my life, and jazz musicians are starting to become more prominent. Often, I play the piano in bars. I am known in the town of Chicago as one of the most skillful pianists and musicians in the area, even though I'm a black woman. In my day, I have played with Louis Armstrong's King Oliver Creole Jazz Band. These days, you can find me dancing to Charleston with my other black friends in dance halls that do not restrict blacks from attending. The Ku Klux Klan has been wreaking terror on the blacks, Catholics, and immigrants around where I live. I once awoke in the middle of the night to them whipping me, and one of them slashed my face with a knife. Now my face is scarred. Around where I'm living, in Chicago, Illinois, organized crime is on the rise. Prohibition has been banning the consumption of liquor, and bootleggers and gangster organizations have been setting off bombs in the town to protest. All citizens of Chicago have been living in fear during this time. I'm very afraid for the well-being of the town of Chicago. January 24th, 1935. The economic downfall of the Great Depression has taken a huge toll on my life. The Anderson children no longer need my help, and I have yet to find another family to maid for. Saying goodbye to those children was a difficult task for me. I have recently been in a great amount of pain and have been working in a slaughterhouse earning minimum wage to help keep everything together. I have been living with my friend Caroline for some time now, with her husband and children. She says that I must find a husband, but I am not interested in this. My primary interest is getting over the Great Depression, making enough money to feed myself instead of taking from Caroline's food, and most importantly, keeping my piano skills sharp. The Roosevelt administration has come up with the National Recovery Act, which was intended to encourage no discrimination in hiring and equal wages for blacks and whites. These acts are rarely followed by business owners. They rarely employ blacks, so finding another job that isn't in the grotesque slaughterhouse is extremely difficult. I am wishing to move up to a better paying job in the steel or auto industry, but Jim Crow laws still being in effect makes these plans nearly impossible. If I cannot complete this goal, I will go back and be a maid for a family outside the suburbs. September 28, 1941. Dear Diary, I have met an educated African-American husband named Joffrey who was educated in military politics. We met at one of my showings in a bar in downtown Chicago. Joffrey has a taste for ragtime, which is my specialty. We met after one of my performances and have been in love ever since. We have been together for 2 years, and now he is being drafted to be an officer in the Second World War. Only 12 African American men were chosen for this position, and Joffrey was one of them due to his military tactics and high education. They need a good defense mechanism against the strong forces in Germany like Hitler. He is going to be a member of the Army. Pressure from the NAACP on Roosevelt to enlist African Americans also led to Joffrey's military drafting. We have a child named Jamal, who I will stay home with and take care of while Joffrey is gone. I am working in an ammunition shop, and Jamal comes with me to work every day. I am still working hard labor, but my husband's money he left us from the former job has been helping. I am also facing job discrimination, and better working conditions with better wages are nearly impossible to find. My friends are facing serious debt and issues. Emotion and tensions are building, and there is a threat of a march in Washington, D.C. of black people protesting. May 17th, 1948. Today, I am 50 years old. My husband Joffrey has been home from the war for 3 years. The Army was segregated, but after the war, President Harry Truman issued an order that requires the integration of the U.S. Armed Forces. The President is doing many good things for the black population of America. I voted for Harry Truman because all the great things he promises to do for America's black population. He organized a 15-man committee concerning civil rights to suggest and propose new laws and legislature to protect us from being discriminated against. Truman is the first president of the United States to address the NAACP. He promised us that the government would end racial prejudice in our lives. He issued an order that segregation, lynching, and discrimination at the polls was no longer allowed to occur. In other news, my son Jamal loves to hit the balls around with his friends. He is very inspired by Jackie Robinson, the first man to be signed to a Major League Baseball team. I regularly practice the piano these days, and hopefully I will play in bars again one day. December 8th, 1955. Finally, separate public schools are considered unconstitutional due to the Brown v. Board case jurisdiction. Jamal can finally go to school with the same rights as everyone else and receive the same rights as the whites. Though they will most likely be treated poorly, I believe my son can stand up to white people's bullying. The civil rights movement for black people is beginning to mold, and things are going to change greatly for my family. Rosa Parks also refused to give up her seat on the bus, which was a massive change and symbolized us black people standing up for what we believe in. Now black people are walking everywhere and boycotting the bus system. We are now getting closer to having integration and equal rights all around. The rest of America is currently angered at the integration. White students are going to disagree with the decisions made in the court decision and harass the black students. Jamal will most likely be harassed, but I am a part of his supportive family. A new character on the rise has entered the spectrum of my life concerning the gaining of civil rights. Martin Luther King Jr. leads the American Civil Rights Movement with grace and serves as an inspiration for us all. He is inspired by the nonviolent techniques used by Gandhi, and his goal is to lead us in gaining legal equality for all people. June 9th, 1961. I am delighted at the founding of the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee. Jamal has joined this committee because he feels that it gives him hope for a future of equality. Jamal is becoming very involved in civil rights rallies. I am encouraging him to participate in Freedom Rider activities, where he will travel down south on a bus in the effort to encourage racially integrated bus transit facilities. This program is sponsored by the Student Nonviolent Committee and the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE. Civil rights activists everywhere are singing of the freedom struggle us blacks are going through during this time of receiving freedom. Martin Luther King Jr. speaks often about racism and is one of the main leaders during this Negro Manifesto. We sing freedom songs at Mass that highlight the struggles we have been enduring in this movement. Usually I play the organ in Mass and it keeps me occupied. Though I'm reaching old age, I am fighting for the rights of Jamal, but I am also fighting for the right to work somewhere that isn't a domestic housework. The NAACP is building up self-respect for us Negroes and helping encourage the fight against segregation. April 9th, 1968. Dear Diary, 5 days ago, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. This marked a period of sadness for me and my family, but the future is looking bright from here. I have been employed at a restaurant in Chicago where I still face racial prejudice, but the owner of the restaurant pays me well, and working conditions are safe and clean. Race riots have broken out in my city, but I am doing my best to protect my 18-year-old son from inflicting his own violence on the whites. I want to shield him from all the poverty and violence I have experienced through the years, and I want to keep him safe. Though I am reaching old age, I am still a civil rights activist, a hard worker, and my piano playing has soared to new heights.